I'm Bob Phillips. Back in 1983, I was asked to prepare a feature story for television about a Joplin firm that repaired department store mannequins. I didn't know it then, but from that beginning, I went on to do over 460 TV features, which were called the Phillips Files. Done in the four-state area, they aired between 1983 and 1997. Along with some talented photographers, we covered a lot of ground, traveling interstate highways and country lanes, up mountains and down hollers, to document the people, places, and things that make up this many-faceted area. Here, then, are a few of the Phillips Files. Mike Bushnell of Parsons, Kansas, has a rather unusual hobby. He collects old license plates. Mike began saving them back in 1949 as a sideline to his main hobby, buying and restoring antique cars. The plates sort of came along for the ride, but they started piling up, and today in his garage he has over 600 of them, mainly from the state of Kansas. The rarest one is from 1913, the first year the Sunflower State issued license tags. Mike has two complete sets of Kansas year plates from 1913 to 91. Up to 1920, Kansas plates carried only numbers. In 1921, the year of issue first appeared on them. In 1930, a two-number prefix was added, and in 1951, a two-letter county code was adopted that's still in use today. Kansas has 105 counties, and Mike has a full set of plates from every county from the years 1965 and 66. I had to ask him the obvious question, where does he find these old plates?
Well, through the License Plate Association, which has about 3,000 members. You can correspond with them and trade tags. You pick up some at swap meets. We've went through a lot of old barns to find them, and a lot of people used to nail them on the side of the barn, you know, or up on the roof to cover up holes in old houses, and any old garages. Well, you scrounge around and see what you can find.
On one wall, Mike has a set of 50 plates, one from every state in the Union. There are some scarce ones here that are seldom seen in the Midwest. Mike is still searching. There's a third set of Kansas year plates nearly completed, lacking only a 1913 and 14. Also, he has plates from 6 of the 12 Canadian provinces and would like to find the others. Some people might consider these throwaway pieces of metal as junk, but collectors will pay up to $150 for a prime plate, even more if it's a rare issue. It's hard to imagine a license plate collection more extensive than this one. These old-timers are valuable. You might check your garage or basement. You may have a little treasure hidden somewhere. In Parsons, Kansas, Bob Phillips, KODE News. Jack Purrington Sr. of Lamar is a collector and restorer of old farm tractors. He's owned the Barton County Implement Company, a John Deere dealership, since 1956. Today, Jack has 100 vintage tractors, 70 of which have been fully restored to operating condition. Most are John Deere's, but he has other brands awaiting work. He finds them through trades and often buys them from farmers. Some were even given to him. They usually look pretty ratty when Jack brings them home. He says it takes 6 months and $5,000 to renovate an old tractor. The toughest job is finding spare parts. John Deere began making tractors in 1912, and Jack has at least one model for every year from 1915 to 1960. This one rolled out of the factory in 1934. This 1943 model, driven by grandson Mark, looks like it just came from the showroom. The prize of the collection is this 1915 Waterloo boy, one of only 20 known to exist. This 12-horsepower giant originally sold for $600. Today, it's worth over $13,000. Jack lines up his restored machines near his business on special occasions, and he says tourists often stop to admire these relics from the past.
Like, and the buses come by and the old people come out, and you get about 4 of those old men off of those buses, and they say, "Boy, I drove one like this one," and then they come down the line and you see the kind he had. Because everybody's interested in something old. I guess because we all get old and we know what we like. It's real interesting to watch those old farmers that have been on the farm and had that same type of equipment talk about what they did.
Would Jack sell any of his tractors? He'd consider it, but probably not. At present, he keeps them in 4 large sheds, but he hopes to put up a permanent building someday to properly display the collection. Meanwhile, he'll keep looking for more old junkers to adopt and rejuvenate. It takes a lot of time, money, and dedication to bring one of these rusted old workhorses back to life, but Jack says it's worth it. He's not only rebuilding old tractors, he's also rekindling memories. In Lamar, Bob Phillips, KODE News. Recreational vehicles, RVs, are one of America's favorite means of travel, allowing campers, vacationers, and retirees to take a little bit of home with them when they're on the road. Recently, Doug Lown of Coachlight RV Sales and Service in Carthage gave us a look at some of these popular vehicles. Coachlight keeps over 100 RVs on hand, priced from $7,500 on up. The term RV can apply to a motorhome, travel trailer, a 5-wheeler, even a pop-up tent trailer. Of course, the more goodies an RV has, the higher its cost. Basic models have a refrigerator, range, TV, microwave oven, heating and air conditioning, and a half bath. Something fancier, perhaps? Consider this top-of-the-line motorhome. This awesome house on wheels has all the standard trappings, plus a dishwasher, full stereo sound system, washer and dryer, a deep freeze, and an outside TV camera to scan the perimeter. It gets 11 miles a gallon and sells for a cool $199,000. Many people think RVs appeal mainly to senior citizens, but Doug says that ain't necessarily so.
Well, it's not what most people think. Majority, I think people, when they think about an RV, they think of an older generation crowd, which there is a lot of sales in that area. And as we get an older generation of baby boomers especially, that's where you're getting the business from. But the RV buyer anymore can be from 25, 30 years old. We sell some units to some folks that are in their mid-70s. So it's not really this particular section as far as age group that buys RVs. It's a real general broad spectrum.
The RV phenomenon began in the late 1970s and hasn't stopped since. A fuel crisis, a desert war, and a recession haven't affected RV sales a bit. Nationwide, 250,000 of them are sold each year. One interesting statistic: the average RV buyer will own 5 different ones during his lifetime.
RVs are highly popular today, and it's easy to see why. They're comfortable, luxurious, and eye-appealing, but probably most important, they're a lot of fun. In Carthage, Bob Phillips, KODE News. Janie and Bob Varsalona of Galesburg, Kansas, are born collectors. Their home contains antiques of every kind: furniture, dolls, dishes, silverware, and memorabilia. But the apple of Janie's eye is her paper doll collection. She zeroed in on this hobby about 25 years ago and today has over 1,000 sets of old paper dolls. She even has a contemporary paper doll of herself
designed by a fellow collector. Janie finds these fragile creations at antique stores and paper doll conventions. The figures may depict royalty, children, famous people, or the fashions of the day. Paper dolls originated in China in 487 BC. The first commercial ones appeared in the early 1800s in France, England, and America. At one time, a paper doll cost a penny, but many were free, coming in magazines, newspapers, comic books, postcards, bread wrappers, and cereal boxes. These days, depending on rarity and condition, an old paper doll can bring as much as $500. Janie's oldest one dates from 1857 and is collector priced at $200. First meant to entertain children over 2 centuries ago, paper dolls are now eagerly sought by collectors.
I think it's a nostalgia thing, really. A lot of the paper dolls are, they made paper dolls of the dolls, and so you like to have the doll and the paper doll, so collectors do that. We have collectors for so many things, like Wizard of Oz or Gone with the Wind. They collect memorabilia, and they also want the paper dolls. And a lot of us remember the movies, and we had certain favorites in the movies, so we want the paper dolls that were those movie stars.
Today, there are paper doll collectors around the globe. 2,500 of them are in this country alone. For the last 17 years, Janie has written and published a quarterly newsletter devoted to paper doll collecting, which she mails to her colleagues in all 50 states and 6 foreign countries. Paper dolls may seem a little hokey and old-fashioned today, but a superb collection like Janie's serves to remind us that these are the things memories are made of. Memories of simpler and happier times. In Galesburg, Kansas, I'm Bob Phillips. Rick Stockton of Joplin has been a student of the Civil War since high school. For nearly 10 years, his hobby has been recreating scenes from that conflict in miniature. He's completed 14 dioramas, several of them representing Civil War battles fought in this area at Carthage, Newtonia, Wilson's Creek, Pea Ridge, and Baxter Springs. The scenes depict not only the battles, but also the human side of war. Soldiers playing checkers, writing letters home, or taking a nap. Every uniform, cannon, and horse is precise in detail. The figures are 20 millimeter HO gauge, meaning they're about an inch high. The lead blanks Rick uses must be cleaned, sanded, and primed before the paint is applied. In all, about 2 hours of work is necessary on each piece. This is a hobby that demands a great deal of patience. Rick's got plenty of that, but there's one problem. He's running out of space at home for his models. To ensure authenticity, Rick researches period books, pictures, and paintings. He also travels to battle reenactments and tours the old battlefields. His interest has been heightened, he says, by studying the battles fought close to home and by recent movies and television specials.
The PBS series by Ken Burns was a great series. Also movie Glory and the North and South that we've seen on TV, the Blue and the Gray. A lot of those were even shot or done in this area too, just to get the realism of the area. Now, this was a period in time that it brought it back home. You were fighting brother against brother, and just the heroism that you read about and some of the stories you hear, it just made it that much more interesting.
Rick often takes his tiny creations to area schools to lecture 5th and 6th graders about Civil War history. He says the kids are always keenly interested. His next project? Creating a scene from the naval battle of the Monitor and Merrimack. That one, he says, is going to take a little time and a little more space. By creating these scenes of triumph and tragedy in miniature, Rick is recalling and preserving a vital part of the history of the four-state area. With patience, research, and dedication, he's enjoying a truly rewarding hobby. In Joplin, Missouri, I'm Bob Phillips. This traveling reproduction of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial isn't as big as the monument in Washington, nor is it made of black granite. But its message, its emotional impact, is in no way lessened. To the neutral observer, if there is such a thing, this 252-foot wall with its 58,187 names evokes many images. Images of the veterans of other wars paying silent homage to fellow soldiers, men and women they probably never knew, but revere nonetheless. Images of families still numbed by a loss too deep to describe, and young children who, thankfully, bear no recollection of America's most controversial war. Images of hands, young hands, weathered hands, reaching out to touch the name of a relative, friend, or comrade. Images of the simple mementos left here, quiet assurances to the dead that they're not forgotten. Images, powerful images of the veterans of Nam, caught in a time warp, recalling those days of steaming jungles and sudden death, their faces searching the black wall for names they remember only too well. Images reflected in the dark, moving words of Steve Mason, the poet laureate of the Vietnam Veterans of America.
This wall is dedicated to mothers, fathers, sisters, brothers, wives, husbands, sons, daughters, lovers, friends, and most of all, dreams of the men and women who risked it all in Vietnam, while you continued to lose them during and after that war, with less chance than they for a parade, and no chance at all for an explanation. You lost them to bullets, internment, drugs, suicide, alcohol, jail, post-traumatic stress, Agent Orange, divorce, but never, never did any of you ever lose them to the truth, which is now being shared across this great nation in such an act of spontaneous moral courage its like may never have been seen on any battlefield in the history of mankind. Amen to that, brother.
When the wall moves on this weekend, over 40,000 people will have been here to honor the Vietnam veterans who fell in battle. The wall is dedicated to a process of healing for the nation, individuals, and families. But with its many indelible images, it's also a proud and solemn tribute to all the American men and women who served in Southeast Asia. In Carthage, Bob Phillips, KODE News. Mike O'Mallinson of McDonald County, Missouri, is in the unusual business of making gingerbread, that florid type of woodwork seen on many older homes. He and his wife Jess moved to the Tiff City area in 1988, and since then they've decorated several homes in the four-state area, older ones and newer ones. They can design, make, and install the gingerbread, or we'll ship you the pieces and you can do it yourself. Jess designs the patterns at her drawing board using either her own ideas or the customers'. Gingerbread can go on the exterior or interior of a home, or both, and costs from $300 to $3,000 or more, depending on how much of it you want. When the design is finalized, Michael fashions the pieces, usually using ponderosa pine. Gingerbread came into vogue during the Victorian era in England, when, by adding this ornate millwork, a modest home could be made to appear fancier. The style caught on in America quickly, but went into decline about 1910, when critics began condemning it as ostentatious and just plain tacky. But Michael says after a period of eclipse, gingerbread is coming back.
There is a big demand, not particularly in this area, but it's growing. It's slowly starting to come around, and people are starting to pick up on it. I went out of style for a short time, and then came in Art Nouveau and then Art Deco. And then recently, since people, instead of building new homes, are starting to buy older homes that are partially run down and are rebuilding completely. And a lot of them are the old gingerbread style homes.
There are only about a half dozen places in America where gingerbread woodwork is still made, and the Malansons are the only source in the Midwest. Jess and Michael keep plenty busy with a backlog of orders, but occasionally they'll get out to visit old gingerbread homes in the area to get fresh ideas. The possibilities, they say, are endless. Jess and Michael are convinced that this type of ornamentation is here to stay. It may not be everyone's cup of tea, but if you'd like to make your home a little special, a generous helping of gingerbread might just be the way to go. Bob Phillips, KODE News. This is Pegasus, a mini airplane owned by Rod Jones of Carthage. A veteran pilot, Rod recently completed restoration of the plane and now flies it around the Joplin, Pittsburgh, Carthage area. We were on hand recently when he was checking it out. This pint-sized aircraft is 16.5 feet long with an 18.5-foot wingspan and weighs only 614 pounds with 16 gallons of fuel. It has a 90-horsepower aluminum engine and can cruise at 145 miles an hour up to 12,000 feet with a range of 500 miles. Unlike the plane, Rod is not small. At 6 feet 1, it takes some doing for him to get into the tiny cockpit. He likens it to a one-seat sports car. Officially named the Bushby Midget Mustang, the plane was built from a kit in 1961. In the mid-'80s, it sustained major damage in a takeoff accident. Rod bought it in 1989 and began restoration using the original plans. It took him 2.5 years, and when he finished, he named it Pegasus, after the winged horse of mythology, and painted it what he calls Mack Truck Red. Pegasus is fun and easy to fly, but Rod says though it's appealing to the eye, its practical use is limited.
You know, it has a practical standpoint. It's a toy. It's really nothing more than a toy, but you can go places in it if you want to. So from that standpoint, it is practical, I suppose. But no, it's definitely not for everybody, or not for every pilot either. It just depends. It just happened to be that I had a plane that was kind of low and slow, and I thought I wanted something a little different this time. Something that was stressed more heavily and maybe a little faster. And that's primarily the reason I got this one.
Rod says he's never calculated how much money it took for him to restore Pegasus, but he says it cost roughly the same as a bass boat. He's now awaiting final FAA certification of the plane, and after that he'll be taking it to air shows and fly-ins around the area. Wherever it goes, it's sure to attract plenty of attention. If you're built like a basketball or football player, the Mini Mustang is definitely not for you. The quarters are a little cramped in here, but if you can fit into this tiny cockpit, you'll find it's a neat little plane to fly. In Carthage, Missouri, I'm Bob Phillips. Ione Cooper of Pittsburgh is a practitioner of an ancient and unusual art. She creates beaded flowers. Her home is filled with colorful bouquets that never wilt. Flower beading originated hundreds of years ago in France and Italy. A retired school teacher, Ione learned the skill from a Greek woman 25 years ago and has been at it ever since. If it's a flower, she can create it, and each one is unique. No two are alike. She uses tiny beads in a variety of colors that are imported from France, Czechoslovakia, Japan, and Sri Lanka. They're shipped strung on fine thread, and here's the tricky part: removing the beads from the thread and stringing them on thin strands of wire, which forms the backbone for the flowers. It looks easy, but it isn't. It takes time and talent to perfect this technique, and you can't learn how from a book. It requires instruction from a qualified teacher. Ione regularly conducts small classes for people wanting to learn. and she's one of only about 6 such instructors in the Midwest. Making beaded flowers is time-consuming, up to 5 hours for a single daisy. Large arrangements may require 6 months of work. It's also expensive, but Ione says it's well worth it.
You have to plank down your money for all your instruments, and you have to buy beads every week, and you have to buy wire every few months, and it's just an expensive hobby. But in the end, you have something to show for it. While so many things, so many hobbies you have, you come home and there's nothing to show for it except a good time. But this is a lifetime thing that you have that you can keep forever, and I think that's worthwhile.
If you bought flowers like this from a major American department store such as Neiman Marcus or Bonwit Teller, you could pay up to $1,500, and chances are they wouldn't be nearly as perfect in detail as Ione's, which are true works of art. On rare occasions, she'll sell one of her pieces, but most of what she makes, she keeps. Time, patience, and talented hands are needed to create these stunning flowers. As she teaches her students or works on her own, Ione Cooper is producing things of beauty that will last forever. In Pittsburgh, Bob Phillips, KODE News.